Welcome to the lecture series that's taking place in your class. I wanted to thank you all for being here and thank our guest for coming. He'll be introduced by yourself. I wanted to acknowledge that this is possible because of the Mississippi State Board of Contractors who endorses us every year with a grant, and we use part of that grant to bring in experts from around the country. And you'll see today, after the presentation, probably as he's introduced, that Dr. Bleakley is an expert in many things, not just leadership. So thank you for coming, and I'll let Doris introduce Dr. Bleakley.
Okay.
Let's all welcome Dr. Albert Bleakley. Dr. Bleakley is currently professor and chair at Florida Institute of Technology for the Civil Engineering, Construction Management, and Engineering Management programs, 3 programs that he is overseeing. Prior to joining Florida Institute of Technology in 2009, he actually served 29 years as an Army engineer officer. His education, he has his PhD in civil engineering from Florida Institute of Technology, his Master of Science in Civil Engineering from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and Mechanics and Literature from the United States Military Academy, West Point. Many awards that this gentleman has achieved, and we are absolutely thrilled to have him here and listen to what he has to share as it relates to leadership.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be able to be back here. I was here last year as part of the accreditation team. Very impressed by your university here. You have a beautiful campus. My wife and I lived in Vicksburg for my last tour in the Army. So the only other experience I had with Hattiesburg is we would drive through Hattiesburg on the way back and forth to Florida. But we never actually stopped here, so that's our loss. We should have stopped. I got a presentation I'm going to be doing with you, and I got a couple of videos I'm going to show you as well. So just because as your reward for coming here nice and early this morning, have you ever seen a trunk monkey video? No? Okay, well you're in for a treat then.
What do you think you're looking at, huh? What, you don't like the way I drive? What, you want to give you a driver's license? You want a piece of me? Why don't you go out and get you some, huh? Where are you going to go now? Well, you can't speak it off by anybody now. You think you're better than me? Well, you think, oh, I don't like the way you drive. What are you going to say to me? What? Huh? Peace out!
The Trunk Monkey, a revolutionary idea you'll only find at suburban auto groups.
Hey, back in the truck.
Okay, there's a lot more where that came from, but so if I want to look them up, it's Trunk Monkey. However, the rest of this presentation, actually I have one more video later I'll do. So the leadership, harder science. How many of you have been like a captain of the team, or you got younger brothers and sisters, or you've been the leader of some sort, right? So how does we're going to talk about today is how do you, well, generally, what is leadership? And then, did you all have the opportunity to take the personality test? Essentially, there was a link for that, okay? So we'll talk about personality, because a part of being a leader is to know your own personality so you know what your strengths and your weaknesses are. But also, you need to know the people that work with you, because you want to assign people to jobs that's going to suit their skills, abilities, and their personality. Everybody would be happier to do that. We'll talk about motivation. What motivates someone, whether it's at work or a hobby or whatever it is. In every one of these, by the way, there's all kinds of, you could have a whole class on any one of these subjects, so I'm going to try to kind of move through these quickly. My objective is to give you an overview of a course that we teach at FIT called Leading Construction Organizations. So in that course, each one of these is in fact actually like a week. So you're going to get stretch version. Communication. Well, if you're a leader, how do you get people to do what you want them to do? Well, you got to communicate. If you don't communicate, then you're not going to do it. If you communicate poorly, they might not do the right thing. Last of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about culture as far as different, there's all kinds of meanings of culture. Personally, I've lived in Germany and the Middle East. Obviously, those are very different cultures. Mississippi is a different culture from Massachusetts. I like Mississippi a lot better. No offense if anybody's from Massachusetts. So but the way that people do stuff is culture. Now but as far as this subject today, the culture is architects are different from engineers, who are different from construction people, and you need to understand those differences. And all those are different from members of the public, or politicians, or environmental groups, and all the others that you have to deal with. So understanding the fact that there are different cultures and if you understand where someone's coming from, that will help you to communicate better, because you can put it in terms that they're going to understand and accept. So why would we study leadership? Well, generally speaking, like, how many of you are in architecture some board, okay? And the rest of you in construction management, right? We don't have any engineers in the group, right? Okay, so I can tell engineer jokes. It's just within, I'm sure you've experienced this, it's a little different between if you want to be in the architecture field versus if you want to be in the construction field. But what you learn in either one of them is mostly technical. Right? In construction, you learn how to make a cost estimate. You learn how to do a schedule. In architecture, you learn principles of design and what. I'm getting out of my depth here, so. And all those other important things that architects learn. You learn about life safety and so forth. So typically, it's an opportunity for you, because you get that interaction that most places people don't get. But in order to succeed at work, it's not just your technical abilities, right? If you could be the world's best architect, or the world's best engineer, or the world's best construction manager, and if you can't communicate that to someone, then nothing's going to happen. Or worse, it gets confused and bad things happen. So, and then last of all, if you get any management or leadership training at all, it's usually after you've been on the job for a while, and they say, Billy Bob, you are the best architect we have. We're going to make you a team leader. Right? So now Billy Bob's a team leader, but Billy Bob hasn't had any training on how to deal with and lead people other than informally just working together. And in many cases in industry, you don't ever get any training. You get training, it's on the job training. You know what that is, right? You're doing it now, so then you figure it out. So you might not ever have any formal training to teach how to do that stuff. So we're going to give you a little bit. Now this part is from a industry organization. They went out and they interviewed, and this is pertaining to engineers, but it's applicable for architects and construction managers too. They went out and they interviewed, and they said, what do you value in that engineer that you want to hire? Okay? And the number one thing was people skills. Now you probably haven't had any courses in people skills, right? That's what we're doing right now. What you have is courses in technical skills. And the next one was communication skills. Again, except for when you had to take those humanities courses that most people really like to get over with, right? You didn't have a lot in communications. So there's over 50% of what clients said they wanted was 2 skills that you generally don't get a lot of education in. And then now we get to the part, okay, this is what we've been trained on, right? How to do scope and scheduling and changes and all that sort of thing. So the question was, what do you value in a project manager? But it was in the engineering field. Ethical considerations. They want you to be honest and courteous, kind, to be and cheerful, all those things. So again, you don't really train too much in that. I'm sure you get some ethics in your curriculum, and you learn a little about that. And then knowledge experience. Now, if I had asked you to come up, if I had given you these things and asked you to rank them, would you have ranked them this way? Probably not. Being that your education is technical, my guess is you would have put this and this would have been your highest priorities, but that is not the highest priority of people you're going to work for who are not architects or engineers or construction managers. Right? And then last of all, budget. They don't want you to go over the budget too much, which probably you could guess. And that's where that came from. So how would you define leadership? What's a leader?
By example.
Sorry?
By example.
Okay, so that's leader is someone who sets the example of what to do. Like you talk-
Not by word, but by action.
Okay, and they do it, right? Like on a sports team, the captain is generally not just the person that knows the most about the game, but they do it, right? Okay, what else?
People trust them.
Trust, okay? And we're gonna, a little bit later, I'm gonna ask you to think about some, so you can start thinking now. I'm gonna ask you to think about characteristics of good leaders and bad leaders, okay? Here's a very short definition by a guy named Joel Barker. A leader is someone that takes you somewhere you wouldn't go by yourself. Right? There's lots and lots of other, there's whole books about leadership, right? So the where you wouldn't go by yourself part, because if you were going to go there by yourself, you don't need a leader, right? You don't need anyone to lead you if you're hungry to go down and get lunch, right? But you do need someone to lead you, maybe to go into education and get your class or whatever. So there's people in your lives that have been influences on you that influence you to think I should be sitting here right now listening to this lecture, right? Are leadership and management different? Yes? Okay. What do you think is different? Whenever I hear management, you all read Dilbert, right? The little pointy-haired boss guy. That's what I think of for manager, right? So manager is somebody who has a set of rules and follows them, right? And you need that. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to track a budget. Somebody has to do all those things. But a leader is somebody who decides where to go, where you're going, okay? The direction you're going to go in, why it's important to get there, and as opposed to, I'm just going to keep kind of stay on track. You need both things. At the very top up here, we call this strategic leadership. Okay? There's a company called Kimberly-Clark. You may have heard of them. A couple decades ago, Kimberly-Clark was a paper manufacturer. They just made newsprint, regular paper, that kind of stuff. But their CEO decided, well, this is not a really profitable industry. We only make a relatively small amount on this. We have all these plants to make paper, everything. And they started thinking, what could we do that we could use the resources we have and the people we have, and we could make something more profitable. So he came up with the idea of something every one of you has heard and come in contact with, Pampers. Disposable diapers. Didn't exist at the time. There was no such thing. So he came up with the idea we can make a paper product that will touch everyone. Okay, so, and from there, they went off into all kinds of other like medical applications and so forth. And Kimberly-Clark became like massively profitable because they changed the direction, decided where to go. Now, they needed all kinds of managers down at the plant because they got to change their production process and all that. Okay, so there's another definition. Management's doing things right, and leadership is doing the right thing. Doesn't mean right in a moral sense. It means right as in we could have kept making paper like we were doing, but we decided we're going to go out there and invent Pampers and other stuff instead. So these are some functions, and some of you named some of these off a few minutes ago when we talked about leadership. Decide where to go. Align the people and the resources. So back to Kimberly-Clark, set up, figure out what factories are going to make what products, what people are going to be in charge of that kind of stuff, so that's your resources. And then motivate and inspire the people, and then get them, and the other part is, as a leader, you represent the organization. So if you're the president of the Kiwanis Club or whatever, you probably go out and you speak to other organizations and represent your club. If you need, you might have to, let's say you happen to be the in charge of the construction management and architecture program here, you got to go out and represent the program to the provost or the president or the industry advisory team and get the help, get those resources, represent the organization. Oops, sorry. Communicating. Now, none of this does any good unless you can tell somebody about it. Like you do figure you're really brilliant and you figured out what resources you need, but you don't tell anybody or you don't explain it in a way they can understand. Just this morning, I was looking at plans for future renovations here. And those were done as basically, I guess they were BIM renderings maybe, 3D renderings. Because if you take out a set of blueprints and show most people, and they just look at that, it's like, that's not all inspiring. I don't really understand what it is. You already had lines on your blueprint, so why do you need to move the lines? What's the deal? But if you can show them a 3D rendering of this is what the space looks like now, and this is what it can look like, then that communicates. So know your audience. Okay, where do leaders come from? They come from Florida, right? Because that's what I'm here lecturing. But if they're not from Florida, where else do they come from? Where do you find a leader?
Everywhere.
They're everywhere. Okay, here's number one, natural talent. Right? When you were a kid, maybe now, you wanted to go out and play baseball or play football. Somebody probably kind of got to be the team leader and tell other people what to do. That wasn't an appointment or anything. It was just kind of, some people naturally have a tendency to want to lead. Okay? They can be appointed. If y'all have probably been in some kind of a design group, right, with other students, and the instructor might or might not say, Betty, you're in charge. Or you might get together and decide, okay, Betty's going to be in charge. Somebody has to be in charge because somebody's going to make the schedule or whatever. Okay? So you can be appointed. You can be elected. We're almost to that point. We got some elections coming up tomorrow. Electing somebody doesn't necessarily make them a leader. Hopefully you elect someone who is a leader already. Doesn't always happen, but at any rate, you could be trained. You saw from my background, I was in junior ROTC in high school. The reason I did that was not because I wanted to be a great leader, but because I had long hair and my mother wanted to make me get a cut. So she made me join, I had been in the band, she made me join ROTC instead. I still have short hair, so it worked. So my mother was a leader. I decided where I was going to go. And you can be developed. When I talked earlier about you're out on the job, you worked a couple of years, you've been a really good architect or construction manager or whatever, and they recognize that you do a good job, so they make you a team leader or a project manager instead of an assistant project manager, whatever. Now, when you do all development, also is everything you do in your life develops you as a leader. The more experience you have, the better you're going to be able to do future things, or you're going to know what not to do in some cases. So, leading and managing. So now is your turn. Hopefully you've been thinking a little bit. So this little diagram, there's the leaders out in front, showing people where to go and leading them to do it, whereas the boss or manager is just telling other people what to do and maybe helping or maybe not. So what are some good characteristics of leaders that you have had in the past?
Confident.
Confidence, okay, what else?
Not afraid to stand up.
Okay, courage, call that. What else? Okay, being involved, okay. Not, the opposite of involved would be aloof. There's your travel word, right? What other things? Good leader.
They listen to
Listen, okay, and
making the right decision.
making good decisions, right? I'm sure you've had, now we're going to get to the bad leaders in a minute, right? Everybody has more things on bad leaders usually. So what are some, now I'm sure there's more than that. I'm going to show you, the next two slides are going to be, when I've done this before in other classes, I kind of I had them write them down and turn them in. So I made some lists. There's more on the bad than the good. So what are some bad leadership traits?
Selfish.
Selfish, okay? Whoa, that's like this one, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about some motivation and needs theory, what motivates people to do things. You can be motivated because you're doing it for you, or you can be motivated because, I forgot I had a microphone there, or you can be doing it because you want to help other people. Right? What are some other bad characteristics of leaders?
Poor communication skills.
Okay, so you don't really understand what they want you to do, right? Okay, we're looking at, this list is, again, when I do this in class regularly, I have people write down like the top 5, and I collect them up, and then I put them together. So Here's number one, taking care of employees. Okay. And the numbers out there are, my classes typically are 50, 60 people, whatever. So that was something that 43 people had written down. Good communications, we talked about that. Delegating, we didn't talk about that one. What does it mean to delegate a task? Give it to someone else, okay? And when you're delegating, as opposed to just telling them exactly what to do, you're giving them the authority to do the task, but you're letting them, within certain parameters, decide how to do it. Okay, so that's delegating. Giving a clear mission and job standards, what it is they want you to do. And then ask for and take advice, which is, and participate with the workers. Hey, now, there's more on the worst category. That's just what it goes. Poor communication. Okay? Have you ever, I'm sure you've all had a job or a task where you thought you were doing what you were supposed to do. Hopefully it wasn't like a truck project or something, right? So you thought you were doing what you were supposed to do, but it turns out that wasn't what they meant. Not having no concern for the employees. And they're just there to make themselves look good. Okay. Poor standards. Now, this could be like your own personal standards. You ask people to do stuff that you don't do yourself. Over supervising, micromanaging. You ever had somebody that wants to tell you exactly what to do, like every little thing? Frustrating, right? Wasting time and having meetings. That's not a whole lot of them up there, but that's just, these are students. If they were actual professionals, I think wasting time in meetings and not having a point to what you're doing would probably be higher, because that's a common thing out in industry. Aloof, that's why I wanted to throw the aloof part in there. Okay, aloof, they stand off. I worked for a guy, he was an engineer. He was the resident engineer for San Antonio for the Corps of Engineers. So he had an office of about 30. It was in a nice office building. The guy would come in the morning. He would walk through all the other folks, go to his corner office, go in there, and he would not come out until it was time to leave in the evening. Now, he wasn't doing that because he was mean or anything. He was doing it because, back to the personality test, he was the classic engineer personality test, which is INTJ, introvert. He just didn't like to deal with people. So he preferred to work in a nice, quiet environment. If he wanted to communicate, he preferred to send you an email or do it in writing, as opposed to go talk to you. Okay? Now again, he wasn't a bad person, but people can interpret that as, oh, he's too good. He doesn't want to talk to me. And not technically competent, this might surprise you, that's like the very lowest one that I rank, because you kind of think leaders got to be technically competent. Well, yes and no. If you're a general, you don't have to be the best shot with a rifle or best at driving a tank or anything. You need to know when to delegate things. I was pointing to where it was in the previous slide. Delegate things and let people that know how to do that stuff do it. Okay, so Walter Bennis is a guy that writes a lot of leadership books, but here's characteristics that he gave for leaders. Manage the attention. In other words, focus people on where we need to go. Sometimes, if the leader doesn't have a clear idea where they want to go, then how are you going to go there? And then trust, I know somebody mentioned that earlier, and meaning, to explain why what you're doing is important. If you believe it's important, hopefully the leader believes it's important. If you believe it's important, you're going to want to do a better job. Making people feel significant. Okay? Again, explain why you're doing this. Why do we need to do this task? Now the leaders themselves are competent and keep learning new things. That's one of the things I run into, particularly like, I'm sure you all do BIM, and any of you ever done anything with drones? Drones? Okay. So there's all these new technologies out there, and to be honest, it's you guys are lucky in the respect that for you're just learning this stuff as you go. For me, I'm like too old to train. So some of those things, like I still can't get data on my phone. It's kind of hard. But anyway, so I can be outdated, and that's true not just in the college setting, but even out on the job. You know, the person that's the CEO of the construction management company or general contracting firm you're working for, when they were your age, they didn't have smartphones, they didn't have tablets, they didn't have drones, you know, you name it, didn't have it, and so it's easy to get behind on the technology curve, which is why they want to hire you guys, which is good. And it's a positive thing. Part of the community. That's back to the example of the resident engineer. He just goes and shuts himself in the office. People don't really feel a connection with that person. Makes work exciting. Well, yeah, it depends what you're doing. If you're working on an assembly line, it might be difficult to make that exciting, but fortunately, none of you are going to work on an assembly line, so, you know, you get to design new buildings and build new buildings. So that by itself should be exciting. This Phillips here is another person that studied, there's all kinds of people study management. It's a popular thing to do. It's easier than managing. So Phillips wrote a book called Lincoln on Leadership. So what he did was he studied Abraham Lincoln. Here's an interesting tidbit for you that you maybe didn't know. Abraham Lincoln got 40% of the popular vote. When Abraham Lincoln ran for president the first time, there were 4 candidates. And so Lincoln was the one that ended up getting, I don't know how they did it, whatever rounds they had to go through in the electoral college back then. They didn't even have electricity then. Electoral college, Lincoln ended up being president, but Douglas was another one. You may have heard of Lincoln Douglas debates, but there were 2 other people running also. So, you know, back in the day, he was also the first Republican president, because the Republican Party was a new thing then. Before that, he was a Whig, W-H-I-G. So probably somebody made a strategic decision that Whig, that sounds like we wear funny white hair, so we're going to change the name. So these were observations that Phillips made about Lincoln. Keep your temper. Lincoln had lots of trouble, lots of problems. He had a civil war going on. But he didn't lose his temper. He stayed cool, he stayed calm. And as a leader, you got to do that because you need to inspire people and have confidence that, yes, we can do this. Right? And then you can't get too much worse off than when Lincoln was president. Find your grant. I was talking about this last night. Lincoln went through a lot of generals before he finally found a general that wouldn't retreat after the battle, and that was Grant. Sadly, any of you from Vicksburg? Okay, good. Grant became famous because he was the commander of the Western armies, and he was in charge of the siege of Vicksburg, which went on for quite a long time. And at the time, Vicksburg was actually on the Mississippi River. It's not on the river now. And it's on these bluffs up over the river, so it controlled travel on the Mississippi River. So Grant undertook the siege and eventually captured the city. The city surrendered on the 4th of July, and because of that, the city of Vicksburg didn't celebrate the 4th of July for 100 years after that. But that's what propelled Grant into national fame, was he managed to capture Vicksburg, which is a very important strategic city, which then controlled travel on the Mississippi River. Lead, hands-on. Lincoln used to go out to the actual battlefield and talk to the soldiers. He didn't sit in the White House and just wait for telegraphs or whatever they had back then. Build your team, and this is part of what I said before. He went through a lot of generals before he found a general that he was confident in to lead eventually all the northern armies. Achievers flock. So if you have good people, they're going to attract other good people. And if you've been on a student design team or something, if everybody else in the team is good at what they do, then I think that inspires you to want to do better, right? Whereas if you've got some slackers on there that aren't really doing anything, that kind of kills your motivation as well. Be accessible. Even though he's the president of the United States, he had kind of an open door policy. He would talk if somebody wanted to go see him, he'd talk to them. So now we get to, so that was leadership in general. Okay. Now we're going to go to the next part, which is, okay, if you're going to lead people, you have to understand the people you're leading. So you have to, the leadership aspect was, I know where I want to go, I know what resources I need, but now I've got to get my team together, and then I've got to inspire that team, and I've got to communicate with the team. So in order to pick people for the team and put them in the right places, Like, for example, if I was on a football team, I probably would not be a good person for offensive line. Right? Just guessing. I'd be okay for receiver maybe if I could run faster than I look. But you know, there are certain positions I just wouldn't be good. I wouldn't be a good center, that's for sure. Okay, so that you got to pick people for their abilities. Now that's a physical ability, but we're talking more about mental abilities. To me, to understand people, that's why I had you. I sent that personality test to you. Okay, did you find that to be pretty accurate when you took it? Personality test, sort of. If you didn't like it, you can always take it again and change it. So it's because one, it helps you understand yourself. As a leader, you got to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, so that you can then, like in the case of Lincoln and Grant, Lincoln wasn't a general. He knew that. He knew he needed to get generals that would be good generals. So not rather than try to be the general himself. So same deal. You need to understand what your strengths and your weaknesses are. If your personality is that you don't like details, but you're in charge of a design team, well then, when you get somebody that's going to design your fire sprinkler system, you better find somebody that is detail-oriented, right? Because if nobody's detail-oriented, then the details aren't going to be right, and that's a problem. Okay. Your personality. So this is what makes you what you are. Now your personality is, there's all sorts of research and dispute on this, but your personality is set very, very early in your life. Maybe you have brothers and sisters. Are you exactly like your brothers and sisters? No. Even though you had the same parents, you had the same environment, you had everything, but yet you're different because that's just where you are. There's, I don't know if it's still true, but up to a couple of, when I read this statistic, which was maybe 10 years ago, every astronaut was either an oldest child or an only child. Because there's a whole thing on birth order. Like if you're the oldest, you tend to be responsible because your parents put you in charge, right? And you're used to dealing with adults. If you are the youngest, you tend to be very accommodating, and you want to get along, and if you're in the middle somewhere, you're a good negotiator. So that's obviously a very, very short version of all that, but your birth order, which you can't do anything about, obviously, has an effect on your personality. And you're influenced by your past experiences. Okay, things I'm going to talk to you briefly. There's a theory called crucible experiences, and that is, you know what a crucible is? If you melt metal, it's that container that you put the metal in to melt it. It might be made out of ceramic, or it might be made out of a big steel thing, like a steel mill. Okay, so crucible experiences are things that have happened in your life which had a permanent effect on you. Right? Now, in your case, you're still relatively young, so you might not have accumulated a lot of these experiences yet, but as you go through life, you will. And then you're influenced by the situation. You're not going to react the same way every time to the same situation. For example, situation, somebody comes up and hits you on the shoulder, right? Now, if you're at the bar and somebody comes up and hits you on the shoulder, that's different from you're at Thanksgiving and cousin Billy Bob just came up and hit you on the shoulder, right? Same thing, somebody hit me in the shoulder, but the way I react is going to be very different, hopefully, unless you're drunk in both places. Hopefully you're not. And influenced by others. Well, who's doing it? How are you interacting with people? Are you familiar with these people? Are these your people? Right? When we moved to Mississippi in the first place, it's like there was two things that everybody asked us. It's like, where are you from? And who are your people? And the third one was, what sports do your children play? But my children were girls and small, so it didn't matter. It's going to make a difference whether you're with somebody you're used to or not, right? If this is the first time you're seeing me, probably the last time you're going to see me. That could be good or bad, depends on your perspective. So you're really not sure how to react to me, right? If you're in a class with your professor that you've had all semester, or maybe you have for 3 other classes, then when you come into that class, you know more what to expect, right? Okay, this is, I said, crucible experiences. Okay, if nothing else, this will convince you don't want to be anywhere close to me. Okay, so this is experiences through my life that have had a big effect on me. Right? I I grew up in a rural area, so that meant when I was a kid, unlike nowadays, maybe it is this way if you're still in a rural area, when I got home from school, I hope my mother wasn't home, because then Jimmy and Kenny and I could just go out and run around and play football or do whatever the heck we wanted. Our favorite thing to do is we had railroad tracks right behind our house, and my neighbor Kenny had apple trees. He also had a chicken house that stank, but so he had apple trees. So one of our favorite things to do as little boys was to go get apples and throw them at each other. When we ran out of apples, when it wasn't apple season, we'd go down to the railroad tracks and we'd get those big rocks that are on the railroad tracks and we'd throw them at each other. I still remember getting hit right here, thankfully not right here. Right here, my mother didn't understand why we thought that was a good thing to do, but I grew up in a rural area. When I was 10, my father died, and I had 3 little sisters who were 4, 2, and 0. The 0 was baby. So remember the birth order thing? I'm the oldest, and my father has now died. So I'm responsible for taking care of my sisters. So you'll see this later. I'll show you my personality. Irresponsibility is like one of the worst things you can do for me. Oops. There was more happening in my life. Okay. I became a Christian when I was 14. What's that have to do with things? Well, that affects my entire outlook on life. There's something called a theory. It's called servant leadership, which is, as a leader, your job is to take care of the people who work for you, not to lord it over them. I told you about ROTC, so I enthusiastically enrolled. We moved to Florida when I was in 10th grade, and my mother made me enroll in ROTC. Well, that had a big effect on my life. I met my wife in 10th grade. I didn't know she was my wife at the time, but later she did become my wife, and we had 2 daughters. Not in high school, okay, later. Then I went to West Point. My father had been in the military before I was born, World War II. He graduated high school in 1943, so pretty much everybody was in the military. But he was an engineer sergeant in the U.S. Army out in the Pacific. But then he just got out of the Army. Got out of the Army after the war. After West Point, I went to Ranger School. I was a platoon leader. In the Army, obviously, at West Point, they're trying to develop you to be a leader. Right? So you go through all kind of leadership training. Ranger School teaches you how to be hungry, cold, and deprived of sleep, maybe possibly all at the same time. So it gives you just a different perspective on things like, gee, a Coca-Cola would be really nice right now. Then I went to grad school. Then after that we went to Germany. So culture, this is my first time to ever be overseas. Germany was a pretty good place to be overseas. German and American culture are pretty similar, but this was still during the Cold War when the Russians were occupying half of Europe. I had deployments to both Gulf Wars, to Somalia, to Bosnia, and in each one of those things I did some new and different things. We were stationed in, I say we, my family, we were stationed in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, we got blown up, which is why it looks so nice in that picture. I'll give you a short story on that in a minute. And then after that, I taught at West Point, which is I had taught as an adjunct AutoCAD, actually, but at West Point was my first time to be a full-time instructor. So I liked doing that. I figured that after I get out of the Army, maybe I'll do that. Then my last assignment, I had a super fun cleanup, and my last assignment was supposed to be, this is great, I'm getting ready to retire, I'm going to come to Vicksburg, Mississippi. Nothing ever happens in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and it's a civil works program, which means like levees and dams and flood control, and there's a project called the Mississippi River and Tributaries Project, which was passed in, I think, 1929, and it's still going on. It gives you an idea how fast those things move. It will never end because it's things like levees over time have to be maintained, et cetera, et cetera. So I came expecting this will be a nice, relaxing last tour in the Army. A couple months later, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And then a month after that, Hurricane Rita hit South Mississippi and Louisiana, a little bit of Texas. So I spent the whole next 3 years like I was deployed again. And then I was planning a trip with my wife because that was as far west as we'd ever been. My wife's also from Florida. So we were planning this great trip to go out to the Yellowstone Park and all that. And then we had flooding, the Mississippi River, and they opened the, I don't know, it wasn't the Morganza spillway, Bonnie Carey. Opened the Bonnie Carey spillway for the first time in like 15 years or something. It was awesome looking, but it screwed up my vacation plans. So each one of those things, those are examples of what I talked about as a crucible experience. I was a different person after those things. I'm going to tell you about this one briefly. This is being blown up, which is made, other than my father dying, maybe the most significant one. So this was 1995. We were in Saudi Arabia. I was an advisor for the Saudi Arabian National Guard. I had been in that building behind you there. That was our little headquarters building. It used to be an apartment building. So that had been converted into offices. So I had been in there having a meeting because my building was kind of that direction, about a half a mile maybe. So I'd been in a meeting in the general's office. I had come out of that meeting. The doors are on the ends of the building because, as I said, it was an apartment building. I came out of the end. I walked around this side of the car. Now, there was, back to the J aspect of your personality, which is details and following rules. Okay? There were some open spots over here, but they were reserved for colonels. I was a lieutenant colonel at the time. So I didn't park in those spots. I parked over here where I was supposed to park. I walked around, came around here. I was standing like this. I had my notebook and my hat, and I was looking down to put my key in the car. And then there was this flash and a bang. I felt heat on the side of my face, and I was kind of knocked back a little bit. And then I was still standing there kind of like this, and I looked up, my hat was gone, my notebook was gone, my keys were gone, and I looked at my car, and it was crushed. Have you ever got out of your car, like in the wintertime, and then you touch it, you get a spark? So my first thought was, why would my car blow up? Right? And then I looked, and if you've ever seen the movies from 9/11 in New York City, they had all the dust all over. It's kind of like the fog now, but the kind of dust all over, and you couldn't really see too good. Okay, so I looked over this way, and you can see my car is crushed. All this glass is blown in. Now, one of the things, a couple of things saved me there. One was I didn't park over there. I'll show you a picture in a minute why that was providential. Second, in the movies, when the bomb goes off, and everything goes that way. That's not what happens. When the bomb goes off, it creates a pressure wave. The pressure crushed this car just like crushing a Coke can. And so all this glass didn't blow into me, it blew into the car. If I had been in the car at that time, I would have got hit by all that glass. I looked over here, and although it was dusty, kind of foggy, there were 3 cars on fire. So I thought, well, wasn't my car blew up, something else blew up. I don't remember if I could even see the building. Not sure, because it was a gravel parking lot, kicked up all this dust. So then I kind of did like this. I didn't touch my face because I thought I might have glass on it. So I kind of like ran around in a circle for a minute, decided what to do. I thought I should go in the building. The building didn't collapse, obviously, but it was pretty well damaged. So I went around to this side. On this side of the building, there's a little metal guard shack, and we had Saudi guards on our building. And so the guard had been apparently blown out of his guard shack. He was cut around his head and his shoulders, and he was doing what any soldier would do, he's looking for his weapon. So he found his rifle, picked it up, looked at me, I looked at him, and I don't speak a lot of Arabic. I had no idea how to say, I've just been blown up, but I guess he figured that out. So thankfully he didn't think I looked like a terrorist, so I just kind of shrugged at it. When I got to the front steps, which are about 3 or 4 steps, there was a civilian employee who had come out of the building about the same time I had, but he had gone the other way, so he was on the opposite side of the building. We met on the steps, he looked at me and he said, what happened? I said, I don't know, something blew up. Now I'm still thinking, maybe it was like a gas explosion or something, because our kitchen is like right down in that area of the building. So he looked at me and he said, well, you got something stuck in your face. I said, well, pull it out. So before then, I looked like Robert Redford. Okay? But he pulled out this little piece of shrapnel. He said it was still hot and shiny. So when I felt the heat on the side of my face, what I felt was a little piece of shrapnel that went up and over and got me, right about here. So he pulled that out. I thought it would bleed, but it's like sticking a cigarette in a styrofoam cup. It just cauterized it. Right? So I had this little divot, but it didn't. I've got that souvenir now. So then I went inside the building. when I first got inside, there's a phone right there and a guard desk. The guard wasn't there. I tried the phone, it was dead. So I walked down to the middle of the building, so I'm walking down the hallway, and I got to this area. This is where our snack bar was. On the other side of the building was the kitchen. So there's a middle hall. So I got to the kitchen. The door to the kitchen was wood, and it had been blown apart. And laying there underneath the debris from the door was one of the cooks, who was an Indian. And he had some blood on him. He was unconscious. There was another cook sitting behind him. His eyes were open, but he was dazed, not responsive. And then there was a third cook standing behind, trying to talk to the other two cooks. So I remember asking if the stove's off, because I'm thinking fire. I said it was off. So I started pulling debris off of the guy that was laying on the ground. So about this time, I said our building was about a half a mile away. Well, we shared that building with our medics. And again, providentially, the medics had been packing their aid bags because they were supposed to go out for field training the next day. So they were there within the amount of time it took me to describe all that, which is probably 4 or 5 minutes. So I left the unconscious guy with one of the medics. Another person, I stood up, the dazed person. We literally walked out the side of the building because no wall was gone. Took that guy out to the parking lot, and then went back in the building to see if, because again, it was our snack bar. Now this is another providential thing. This was about 11:15, 11:30 in the morning. So if it had been about an hour later, there would have been 30 or 40 people inside that snack bar. So if you imagine in this room, if that back wall came across the room to the front wall, that's kind of what happened. So all the furniture stuff was just piled up. I didn't initially see anybody in there, but then somebody saw a hand sticking out from the debris. So we picked up the table, and there were 3 guys piled up in there. You could actually see the spots where they hit the wall. So the first guy was all dusty, didn't recognize him. We picked him up, and the person underneath him didn't have a head. I remember thinking, he's dead. I'm pretty observant sometimes. So, because up till this point, I was hoping maybe they're just unconscious, injured, but all 3 of them had been killed instantly. So carried them out to the parking lot. The 2 cooks, the one unconscious one and the one dazed one, they both died from their brain injuries, unfortunately. So there were 7 people altogether killed, but thankfully, God was gracious and I'm still here. So the only permanent thing I had of that was I got my little piece of shrapnel, and it also ruptured my eardrum. So to this day, my ear rings all the time. But again, it's just my reminder to thank God for being here. So now, I hope none of you have a crucible experience like that one. But you probably guessed that affects my life, So if something seems like this is a bad day, I carry a picture in my wallet. So this is I show this to people. It's like, oh, you think you're having a bad day? Let me tell you about this story, right? And that usually kind of makes it not as bad of a day. So again, I hope that doesn't happen to you. But it doesn't have to be terrorists. It could be a car accident. It could be, who knows? I mean, life is short, so make use of it. This is where this was me. That was my car. That's where the actual bomb was. It was a car bomb, probably 200 or 300 pounds. You see the crater. So back to if I had parked over here in the colonel's spots, I would have got hit with more shrapnel because there's no cars in here. So these shielded me from almost everything, thankfully. So, as I said, here I am. So now we get into personalities. So if you think I have a strange personality, you know why. Okay, now, okay. So Carl Jung, have any of you heard of him? He's famous psychologist. It's pronounced Jung because the Germans pronounce J's as likewise. So he came up with this theory, and it was that people have predictable differences in the way they react to the outside world because they have desired ways that they like to look at the world and think about things. Okay, and this was the origin of that personality test that you took. So if you use your preferred method of dealing with the world, you are most comfortable. Can you deal with it in a different way? Yes, but you may not be comfortable. Okay? This next exercise, and it may not work well. Do y'all have some paper, pen? Okay. Grab a piece of paper and pen. It's a pretty easy task. First, I want you to sign your name with your regular hand. Okay. you have trouble remembering how to spell it, we've got a roster up here, okay? So sign your name. Yeah. What's that?
Ain't gotta be living.
No, however you sign your name, however you do it, piece of paper. We'll have a contest. So sign your name like normal. Now the second part is, okay, now sign it with your other name. No, their other hand, not other name. If you got another name, I don't know about that. Okay, so sign, now do a signature, but use your other hand. Okay, so how'd that work out? Can you read it? Sorta, okay. Did you feel comfortable doing that? No? Did you do it as fast? No? You have to think about it, right? Now, if you had an unfortunate accident and, for some reason lost your dominant hand, I guess you could learn to do it, but it's not the way you like to do it. Having a dominant hand or limb, by the way, turns out it's a characteristic, like even birds have a dominant foot that they like to gravitate with. So it's just a biological phenomenon. So you could learn to do it, but you don't necessarily like doing it. Well, that's the personality thing we're going to talk about. Okay? So that's the purpose of this test. And Myers-Briggs was it sounds like it's two people, but that's actually one person because she's one of those people that have a hyphenated last name. So she came up with this test based on Jung's typologies or ways of looking at the world, and that's the test you all took. Now, there's a lot of different versions of that test. There's some you can pay for it, have a big old written test and all, but hopefully you were able to do the one on the website. There's lots of other personality tests too, but I find this one's usually pretty accurate. So the first thing it looks at was extrovert or introvert. Okay, how many extroverts did we have in the crowd? Okay, how many introverts? Were the introverts just afraid to raise their hand? Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. Oops, backing up. How you like to acquire information, sensing or intuition, we'll get to that later. Thinking and feeling. Okay, how many thinkers? T's. Okay, how many feelers? F's. Okay, so you notice we got a distribution here, right? I won't tell you what the right answer is till later. And then judging or perceiving. Now some of these, the reason I did extroverts and introverts and thinking feeling is they make the most sense. Because okay, look at that makes sense. So these other terms, they don't exactly mean what you might think when you look at them. So I'm going to go through what they mean. So first one, extroversion. You're oriented to the outside world. You are the life of the party. You like to be out there, be with people. You're probably one of those younger children. Okay? You always have people around you, and you want to be with people. You like to talk. Okay? A lot. Sometimes. You're going to talk and then think about it. Okay? You like to be sociable and expressive. Now, if you're, let's say, well, I'll keep going for a minute. Okay, so there's an extrovert. I'm staying in tonight. Okay, now introvert. Private. They prefer to be alone, right? If I want to think about what you do when you want to relax. Do you go out clubbing or do you sit at home, right? Communicating writing. So remember the resident engineer I talked about that would go sit in his office? He would send you emails. I don't know what people did before there was emails. They wrote notes. They're going to think before they say anything. They're going to have to think about it. It's like, what do you want to do tonight? I'm going to get back to you, right? And then you learn by thinking about it or by mentally working through as opposed to physically doing it necessarily. So here's the introvert. Next one. Now this one, I tried to come up with an illustration. So you've all heard the saying, can't see the forest for the trees, right? Yeah, that, okay. So this kind of, I encompass this one as kind of like a forest and trees thing. Are you a forest person or a tree person? Or are you an acorn person? Okay. So first, sensing people, they're oriented on the present, right now. They believe in experience. If I've done this before, then that's how I learn about it. I learn by doing it. I'm not interested in theory. Do y'all take calculus? Did you enjoy that? Did you like that? Okay. There's a lot of theory involved in math, right? So if you have a math teacher that's teaching you about vectors, for example, to the math teacher, vectors are just beautiful things. Okay? They would never think of getting out a rope and tying them together and having 3 people pull on it and illustrate vectors, because they just like to. So if you're a sensing person and you have a theoretical teacher, you have an issue because they don't get into the real or actual applications of this. And then you value actual doing things. Now, intuition, again, the sensing and intuition by themselves don't kind of do justice to the explanation. Okay? So this is the tree person, right? If I look at this picture, I notice that this is a southern pine tree. It's about however many feet high. It's about this diameter, and et cetera, et cetera. And when I had a job working for the lumber mill, that's the size that we're going to cut them down. If I'm the intuition person, it's like, oh, what a beautiful forest. It looks so nice. That'd be a nice place to go and maybe have a hike or something. They like abstract and theoretical things. So if you want to be a mathematician, that's probably a good personality. And they're thinking about the future, not about the right now. Okay? This part, instead of actual experience, they just like, oh, it just seemed like a good thing to do. I felt like that was right. Next one, the thinking and the feeling are pretty straightforward. Thinking, it's logic, it's analytical. It is, you have to explain this to me step by step, why we're going to do this. And you value that, and now the flip side of this is, if you really value this, then you don't necessarily value the opposite of it, which is the feeling part. Okay? I tell my students, I'll show you in a minute what I come out as. I tell my students, if you want to argue for a grade or something, you better have your facts together and not tell me how it would make you feel, because I don't care. Now, my wife and I are exact opposites, which is probably why our children survive. And last one, judging, and that is, now, again, judging, people think it means judgmental. It doesn't mean judgmental. It means you're oriented on details. So again, if you want to have somebody that designs fire sprinkler layouts, you'd really like to have a J person, okay? Because it's like a P person would be, let's just arrange the sprinklers differently, right? Well, you can't do that, right? There's rules. You've got to follow the rules. And you want to be methodical. You like decisions and plans. You don't want to, I'll talk about vacation in a minute. And the perception, this is an artist, you probably could guess. If I create from the heart, it always works. If I create from the head, it never works. Right? So if I just do it. Right? My oldest daughter is an artist. I don't know what went wrong. Yeah, this is me. And the other part about this, you did your test. If you do this at different times in your life, or when you're doing different jobs, for example, you may come out a little differently. Okay, so if you didn't like your personality, there's hope. You can, maybe later you change it. So the yellow one is when I was in the Army. So I'm still way over here in the introvert part. I'm way over here towards the intuition versus sensing. You notice I get a max score on thinking, and when I was colonel, I was over here towards the judging details. There's a regulation. You've got to follow the regulation. Now, when I do this as a college professor, that didn't change. I'm still thinking on. But like I shifted kind of over that way. Now, this INTJ, by the way, is a classic engineer personality type. So there's no engineers in the room, right? Okay, so you know what engineers use for birth control? Their personalities. So if you've got an engineer friend, be sure that. INTP is more of a classic architect type. You're not necessarily bound, there are rules, but you're not necessarily bound by the rules. You like to try different stuff, be inspired. This is a really cool thing. This is a website called OPP.com. And whereas when you did it on your test, it gave you a little paragraph and told you what your personality type is like, this is the opposite. This tells you what really annoys your personality type. So if you have like somebody, boss you work for, and you just really want to get under their skin, find out what their personality type is. You can go look this up. Okay, so for depending on which of my dual personas I have, if I'm an INTJ, the bold-faced ones are things that really aggravate me. So I show this to my students beginning of the semester because if you come to me the week before the term project's due, which I assigned you on the second week of the course, and you ask for more time, what do you think my answer is? No, right? You procrastinated. You are the lowest form of life that I can think of, pretty much, except for those people that challenge my confidence or don't have initiative. Okay, so, or want to come to me and talk about their feelings. Okay, I'm not interested, right? So don't do any of those things. Now this is one where this can be a problem. So if you have a job, you have something where you have to interact with people, but small talk really aggravates you, or socializing, then that could be a difficulty, right? So now back to, I'm the leader. I've got some people that work for me. I've got to send somebody to go meet with the client. Right? I can't go myself. And so I probably don't want to meet. Probably don't want to pick this person, right? That just doesn't like to socialize or talk to people. My son-in-law, the one that's married to the artist, he's a computer programmer, and he is like, go sit in my room and do my thing, and he loves math. In fact, that's what he does for enjoyment, is he makes these very complicated paper models like geodesic domes, and he's really, really good at it. So again, they're complementary. My daughter does all the socializing, and he does all the math and computer programming. Now, this is all 16 possible combinations. Now, what I'm showing you up here is, in white, this is the U.S. population in general. And by the way, U.S. population is not distributed the same way that, say, if I did Saudi Arabia. You'd have a different distribution of personality. So personality is also influenced by your culture. The yellow is class results, again, in my classes, which are engineers and construction managers. So how they're distributed. And then this orange one is for a homework question. I asked my students to, knowing what you now know about personality types, you want to pick someone to be a construction project manager. Okay, what would you pick? Okay. So the key things here are there's some extreme disconnects between the population in general and what, first of all, students in engineering and construction management, in my case, are. And second, what people think would be a good personality to have doing a job. So for example, up here, there's me, INTJ. So only 3% of the population in general is INTJs, but amongst my class of engineers and construction managers, 14% of the class is INTJs. So they just all sit around and don't talk to each other. Okay? Not many people thought that would be a good personality for a project manager. Why do you think they would think that? It's the I mostly, right? Because they said, a lot of them said ENTJ would be great. About a third of the students said an ENTJ. There's at least one ENTJ in this room. So that is a good person because they like to deal with people. Plus they have all those other positive things for being a project manager. So there's some areas where there just aren't many of these people in the general population, but there's a lot of them in engineering and construction management. So if we added up the ones that are circled, that's almost everybody. There's only a few percent that aren't there. What's lacking? ISTJs, that's 12% of the population. ISFJs, so there's like a quarter of the population basically who's almost not represented. Now, that's not bad, because you maybe don't want a cheerleader doing your fire sprinkler layout, right? But on the other hand, you probably don't want your fire engineer trying to set up the social activity. It's just not going to work out. So you want to figure out what what people that work for you are and what you are, and decide how can I best make use of people. Now, can you, just like with the handwriting, can you learn to do something that you're not really comfortable with? Sure. I compare it to parenting. I've never met anybody that really enjoyed changing diapers, but you got to do it, so you do it. Right? Okay, now we talk about motivation. So we talked about leadership in general. One of the big jobs a leader does is to figure out where to go, and then to figure out what their people are, so they know how to make the best use of the people that work for them, or maybe they need to go out and get somebody that has those characteristics. If you want to hire a marketing manager, for example, you maybe don't want to draw from your pool of construction managers. They might not be good at marketing. You might want to go out and get somebody from outside of your normal discipline. Now the next part is, okay, once you got those people, how do we motivate them to do whatever it is we want them to do? What's motivation? What motivates you? Nothing.
Money. Money.
Money, okay, there's motivation. We're going to go through a little exercise where I ask you to, think up things that motivate you. In school, maybe you want to get good grades, or you just want to get a degree, or maybe you're really here to play sports. There's all kinds of things that motivate you. So this is the dictionary definition, internal and external. So money would be an external motivation. Doing something I like to do, that's an internal motivation. To the degree that you can match up what you like to do to what you get paid to do will be good. Right? Okay, so here's a bunch of different motivating factors. Here's some more motivating factors that have pictures. I like pictures. So here's your participation part. Hey, for these, think about, you don't have to rank them 1 to 10 necessarily. Think about maybe your top 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to ask for a couple of you to say what you think. Okay, what's somebody's number 1? Interesting job. What else?
Good salary and advancement.
Salary advancement. Yeah. Achievement. Now, the interesting thing when I did this in class, one of my students who was married and expecting his first child put job security as number 1. So it also depends as you go through your life where you're at, what you want. So this was, again, in regular class, I passed this out, had people fill it out, and I collect their data. So this is what it came out with my class of engineers and construction managers. Interesting work, achievement, good salary. Look at that. We hit all, this is like sort of magic tricks, isn't it? Okay? We hit all 3 of the top 3. And then you kind of work your way down. Now, interesting thing here, job status. So during that really fascinating, impressive resume thing that they read, it says that I'm the program manager for civil engineering, construction management, and whatever else, engineering management. Yeah, okay. So now, I just got appointed to do that, like in lieu of actually getting any kind of promotion or anything. So I have this cool title. My business card is longer than it used to be, but it's like awesome, but that's nice. So sometimes people will actually do this. In the Army, you have this thing called, in the Army, you go up for promotion. If you're a major and you get selected to be promoted to lieutenant colonel, it could be like a year to 2 years before you actually get promoted. So in certain conditions, like if you're, which is called being frocked. Yeah, F-R-O-C-K. Sounds a lot like something else. So you get to wear, and they'll let you wear the rank of a lieutenant colonel, but you don't get the pay or privileges or anything else, right? So it's like, that is 100% job status right there, okay? Now, there's a whole bunch of different theories of motivation. I'm going to touch on just a couple of them because it sounds good. Like when you go home at Thanksgiving or something, you can throw out some of these things and people will assume you've got a college education. So there's 2 basic types of motivation theories. The first one is called a content theory, which is if something is there, you'll be motivated. Okay? And then the second kind is a process theory, which is it's not just that something's there, but there has to be some steps that happen in order for you. There has to be a combination of things for you to be motivated. So the grandfather of all these, Abraham Maslow, Father Abraham, and so this is like the first motivation theory of the modern era. So he said that there's a hierarchy, and the next page I'll show you what is in the hierarchy. And Maslow said basically you start at the bottom and you work your way up. Okay, so if you don't meet something at the bottom, you're not going to move up. Okay? So I'll give you a example. So you start down here, basic physiological needs. If this room was 55 degrees right now, you would not be paying any attention, right? Why? Because all you're thinking about is, I'm freezing. I can't wait for this to be over. Now, you might still be, you're not freezing. Okay? So the next one is, or here's a more crude example for you. I shouldn't have had that big gulp before I came in here, right? I just really got to go. When is this going to be over? It's like in church when it's, okay, the sermon's gone really long, and now they're playing the closing song, and it's like showers of blessing or something. It's like, oh, please. Anyway, next, physical and emotional safety. Now, it doesn't have to be physical necessarily. It could be, I'm in a situation I'm not comfortable. I don't like being around these people. I just want to get out of here. And then you have a need for belonging and love. Now, this could be your interpersonal relationships. This is why if things aren't going well at home with your spouse, it's hard for you to concentrate on your work. And then now we get to esteem and respect. This is, at work, I am recognized as I am a really good architect, or I am a really good construction manager, and so I like going to work because people recognize me. The last one is self-actualization, and that is, I just do this because I want to. Right? Now, most people don't necessarily get to that level. Retired colonels in the Army do, because what the heck, this teaching thing is a great retirement job because I don't really need it, and I do it because I like it. And if I stop liking it, I'll stop doing it. But most of you don't have that option, right? Especially when you're starting off in life, you gotta take care of these needs down here. This is another content theory, and all the content theories are kind of derivative of Maslow. So I'm going to give just a couple of examples. So this one was a guy named McClellan. He came up and he said, well, you really have, although Maslow said there's 5 needs, McClellan said really there's 3. Okay, and those 3 are, I need to be affiliated, that's social relationships. I need to achieve, I want to do a good job. And I have a need for power. Now, just like personalities, when you did you come out as EFTP or whatever you come out as, everybody's different in what their mixture is. So give you an example. So achievement, I really got to do good. If I'm in school and I have a high achievement, I want to make A's. If I don't have a high achievement need, maybe C's or B's are okay with me. Maybe a D's okay, as long as I don't fail. That's all I care. Okay? Affiliation. My oldest daughter was very academically oriented, and she always found it pretty easy to do good in school, and usually did good. My younger daughter went to school for this reason. Okay? She was there because all her friends were there. That's why she went to school. And fortunately, in her senior year, when she figured out that she wasn't going to be eligible for in Florida, we have these Bright Future scholarships. Says you need a 3.0 or better average to be eligible. She had a 2.96. So we had this discussion. I said, okay, Martha, you could do like your older sister and go to a small private school out of state and cost a lot of money, but that's where your boyfriend, now husband, is going to school. Or you could go to an in-state school in Florida and get your grades up so you get the scholarship and have a car. See, motivation, right? Okay. So she got her grades up, was eligible for a scholarship, went to University of South Florida, and got a car. Yay, awesome. So it's because I knew how to motivate. Last of all, power. And power is special. You need to be influential. But there are 2 categories. First category is, I want to be influential because I want to make the organization better. I'm going to be in charge, so I can make this the best architecture, construction management program it can be. The second version is, I just want to be in charge. Do it my way, right? This is Miss Betty when they're laying out the ladies' social at church, where everything has to be exactly the way that Miss Betty wants it, right? And next one. So that was content. Okay, there's other content theories. But basically, if those factors are present, then you will be motivated. The next one, the process theory, is okay. It's not enough just that those things are there. they gotta happen in a certain sequence. So first, equity theory. People value fair treatment. If they think they're not being treated fairly, it's going to demotivate them. Okay, so here's it. I said I give you some math, okay? So here's some easy math, right? And that is what I'm doing for what I'm getting versus what Billy Bob is doing and Billy Bob is getting. So if I'm working at the grocery store, my first job I was a bag boy, and I'm working at the grocery store and I'm getting $1 an hour, which is what I got when I first worked at the grocery store. And I'm working really hard, but meanwhile, Billy Bob is getting $1.50 an hour, and I notice Billy Bob is kind of slacking, right? Billy Bob is not working as hard as I am. So I'm either going to, try to equalize this. So either I'm going to send notes to the boss that Billy Bob's slacking and try to get him get a pay cut, or I'm just not going to do quite as much. Okay, so Billy Bob's getting $1.50, I'm only getting $1. I'm only going to work about 2/3 as hard as Billy Bob because that's fair. Right? Not fair if I'm working hard and I'm not getting anything. Next one, this is also a process theory, and this one says, okay, there's three things. Expectancy. I think that if I do it, I can actually do this, right? The second one is, if I do it, I will get the reward that they promise. And the third one is, this is actually important to me. Okay, so let's say here I'm college professor Al now. So at my school, they say, okay, if you we're going to start a tenure system, and if you can publish 6 papers a year and get at least double your salary in grants every year, then you'll be eligible for tenure. And so once you got the tenure, that'll be awesome. So, okay, now I'm Professor Al. Expectancy. Do I think that I can really publish 6 papers a year and get double my salary in grants? No, probably not going to happen, right? So that means, well, I don't expect that I can do this. So I'm not motivated because doesn't matter how hard I try, I don't think I can do it. Second one would be, okay, let's say, well, I do think I can do all this. If I actually do it, then am I really going to get that reward that they offered? Well, wait a minute, I know Tim over here did all that stuff, and then he didn't get tenure. So I don't expect, if I do it, then I don't think they'll really give me what they promised. Right? Okay, so then I'm not going to do it either. And last one is, do I care? Do I happen to be 62.5 years old and could retire next spring? So does tenure mean anything? No, not necessarily, right? So if any of those three is low, or more than one of them is low, you're just not going to do it. It's not worth it to you. That's just a diagram. And let's see, I think we're probably, speaking of expectancy, okay, so that was motivation. And then this last part, this is the last section, this is leadership style. So we started with leadership, we went to personality, we went to motivation, and now we get around to leadership style, which is, okay, so I've got a vision. I know where I want to go. I know my people. I know what they're good at. I know how to motivate them. So this is all good. Now this is more of the attitude, how do I think about or treat my employees? This is probably the most famous leadership theory around. This is Theory X and Theory Y leaders. Okay. And this is by a guy named McGregor. So he said there's two basic kinds of leaders. One is Theory X, which is autocratic. Saddam Hussein is definitely a Theory X leader. Okay? I'm just going to tell you what to do, and you're going to do it. And if you don't do it, he's going to kick you in the butt or shoot you or something. Right? Theory Y is, oh, we're flower children hippies. Okay, so we just all want to be happy and work together. And I know that if I just give you support and resources, you will flourish and bloom. Okay, the real world's probably in between. So here's an example of Theory X leaders. The basic principle is people work because they're getting paid to do it or they're being made to do it. And so you should be happy you got a job, my gosh, and stop whining, right? Get on with it. You have to direct and control them or else they'll be screwing off. That's where you have 53 policies about internet use at work and so forth. Most people don't have ambition. The safety here is not physical safety, but the safety of security of your job and that kind of stuff. Okay, now theory-wise, all right, they call this democratic, meaning participative, okay? And laissez-faire is just French for just let things go, let people do what they want. Work is nice, we're happy. So, for example, well, I'll get to an example in a minute. So, now, most of the time, one or the other isn't necessarily the answer, right? So, but for example, let's say you're running the Ford assembly plant. You really don't want Jamie deciding to do things in a different order today, right? Because the assembly line's got to work the way it's got to work. Now, if you are in an art studio and you have a bunch of very talented artists or designing greeting cards or whatever they're doing, you can't really tell them exactly how to design that greeting card today because they're artists, right? They've got to be free to do it. So it depends. Which brings it to this other one, which is situational leadership. And that is, it's a function of the job itself, the worker's maturity, how well they've developed, and there's a spectrum. It's not just X, Y. Okay? So in this one, there's a graph. So here, we got down here in number 1. So the axis at the bottom is directed behavior. I'm telling you exactly what to do. It's high directed. How much I'm supporting you. I'm not supporting you much at all. Okay. Any of you ever worked at like a fast food place, McDonald's or something? Okay. Does anybody want you to come up with new creative ways to assemble the Big Mac? No, right? So you don't really, you're not out there coaching people to, yeah, good job, you put that Big Mac together. So this would be not very skilled worker. You have a process they've got to follow, and that's how you control your quality, is you make sure they're following that process, which is how McDonald's produces Big Macs that are the same all over the world. Germany even did it with a beer, by the way. Okay, next one. I'm still directing what you got to do, but I'm giving you more support. Okay, maybe now I'm the shift leader or something. Okay, I got a little more autonomy. As I work my way across, okay, I'm not really telling you what to do exactly, because you're more experienced now. Now I'm in the art studio or someplace. So I'm giving you high support, and I'm not exactly telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I want you to do. I want the product. And then last one is, this is the delegating part, which is take college professor, right? Okay, over here is McDonald's. Over here is hopefully college professor. And that is, when somebody gives me a course to teach, I don't have to go to the dean every time before class and say, here's my lesson for today. Would you look at this and see if that's okay? If I do, then I probably need to be somewhere else. So that's, it just, you teach the course, that's it. All done, okay? Maybe tell me how things are going. And then the last part is communicating. So you can communicate just to give information. You can keep your social relationships. You can convey feelings. I don't know why you would do that. And then you can persuade people. And there's ritual communications. What's an example of that? Good morning. Do you care? No. How you doing? I don't know. I mean, do you ever notice that people sometimes don't even answer the question that's asked? I heard an exchange the other day. It's like somebody said, good morning, and the other person said, okay, thanks, how are you? Okay, so it's just ritual. They don't really, not even listening. Right? Now, in communications, you have somebody that's sending it and somebody that's receiving it. The idea is you want them to receive what's sent, right? So I'm saying, but then there's filters. Okay, and filter examples, all these things: personality, perception, language. Okay, we don't speak the same language, or we don't speak it well, or after Mississippi and you're from Massachusetts, we probably can't talk at all. The environment. If there was like there's a fan or something going on out in the hallway right now, if that was louder and you just couldn't hear me, then we wouldn't be communicating. So because of that, you may or may not receive what was sent. You might get colored. And now, how do you improve that? Well, one way is feedback. Okay? I tell you something and I ask you to repeat that, explain back to me what it is you think I just told you to do. So you went back to the situational leadership. if you're over here on the not that skilled employee end of things, you probably want to, when you give them instructions, have them then repeat that back to you, what they're supposed to do. Now, without any words whatsoever, what do you get out of this? Who's happy here? She's sort of happy because she's got little lines over her head. You always look for people with lines over their head, okay? What's he look like? He is. Yeah, irritated. Anyway, so she's probably explaining why it was necessary for her to park in his parking spot or something. I don't know. So you've got, there's verbal and nonverbal. This is why sending people, you should never send emails if you're mad anyway, or text, right? But this is why it's so bad to do that, because you don't get any nonverbal clues back. It's better to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, or if you can, talk to them face to face, because there's much less opportunity for misunderstanding. Because you see all these things. You're quite good at picking them up. Okay, so this is the end of our thing, because I've got a minute or two left. So, culture. So all those things go together into, if I'm an architect, this is the way I work. I'm a professional, I do my thing. If I'm a construction manager, this is the way I work. And it's a context for it. So I searched the internet for an illustration of this principle. Context for it.
Save a buck. You made a good bid, I couldn't decline, but let me teach you how to dress and respect design. I'm an architect with creative flair, cutting edge, king of architects, I am the heir. If we weren't in charge, your buildings would be a box, cause all you got going is your bed like an ox.
Listen here, pretty boy, you got me all wrong. Go back to your office where you belong. Without me, all you have is plans and plans. Watch me make things happen while I walk on my tan. I'm a contractor, I'm a wet shaker. I get things done while you purchase rifle makers. I get those. Put your drawing workbench, thousands of archives, then I'll pay the next
In your notes, they're clear as glass. Get back to work and quit your sass. I'm the moves on a vision, look at nothing over design. If only you could build them, I wouldn't be confined.
Combine, you're looking like flight, or you don't look about a lot. If I'm not so plain, your measurements are whacking on the smooth that won't fit, and the detailing of those materials won't work. Oh man, so many issues you didn't account for. Have you ever stepped into your office before?
Definition of perfection with the lines that I draw. When you can't even get the right window installed. You're wasting my time, I'm done with this war. But let me ask you, have you ever built anything before?
Who won? Vote now!
Okay. So, you've got, congratulations, just survived an entire semester course on leadership. So we talked about what is leadership, how do personalities affect that, how do you motivate people, and how do you communicate, and how do you make rap music videos. So I know that I have used up every minute because I want to do that in case you had questions. Do you have any questions you would like to ask?
What about an engineer video?
Engineers don't make videos. Engineers don't even watch them because it's a waste of time. All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.